guys, so today I am going to talk about one of my favorite writers of all time, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. It might be a good surprise and it might as well be a bad surprise, but I hope that at the end of this video you will love Rousseau even more or like him a little bit more than you used to. So Rousseau has always been one of my favorite writers. I remember the first time I read a line of his beautiful work and I felt amazingly touched and moved. I immediately felt like I could relate to him, and I remember that at that time many people in the class didn't really understand Rousseau the way I understood him, and I felt really surprised and upset to see that they thought of him as being an egocentric, very self-absorbed and pretentious man, because I really think he was not any of these things. Also was a writer, a philosopher and a composer. He was really successful at writing music and really talented at it, as well as obviously amazingly talented when it comes to writing. All of his work has become so famous. You can think of novels such as La Nouvelle Héloïse, or it's not really a novel but more autobiographical works such as Les Confessions or Les Rêveries du Promeneur Solitaire. And he has also written a bunch of texts which are a bit more about, you know, politics and I would say sociology in a way, like Émile, Le Contrat Social. His work has been, and his persona have been so inspiring that they have influenced so many great writers and thinkers, but also the French Revolution, the Enlightenment, and even to this day there are so many things that we don't really think of as being the, you know, consequences of his mind, but that are either the result of his amazing mind. Also being very famous, a lot of his work or many of his essential ideas and, you know, notions and opinions are well known, such as the common will, the state of nature, the noble sedage, the importance of equality, the fact that humans come on earth as good creatures that are then perverted by society. It's really easy to twist and transform what Rousseau had to say and what Rousseau thought, and I think we're all somehow guilty of that to some extent. But Rousseau is definitely, in my opinion, a great inspiration for people who want to fight for equality and want to fight for not a return to nature, like Voltaire wanted us to believe, or a sort of regression, but sort of ability to make a distinction between what really matters and what's very superficial, between what's really good and what looks good. And that's something we still lack very much nowadays, and I think many of us would benefit from reading some of his work. If you're curious about Rousseau's life, it's really easy to have access to it because he wrote an amazing book which is called Les Confessions, which is, if you forget and ignore some of the previous and slightly different attempts that existed before Rousseau's attempt, the first autobiography ever, at least the first that was serious and completely like, chung, I'm an autobiography. Rousseau was much criticized for it at, you know, his time and also nowadays, because people think of him as being so self-absorbed that he had to write such a big book about himself. But the point and the aim were completely different. Rousseau loved human beings so much, yet didn't really manage to come to terms with their flaws and their strange and odd behaviors, that he wanted to offer them the portrait, the raw, genuine, completely natural portrait of a real man, a very normal man, even though he was a genius, or not really, but you know, not a wealthy man, not a noble man. And he wanted them, by reading that book, to be able to understand themselves more. He wanted to celebrate the self and not himself. This book is pretty amazing because it's the first time that there is nothing really about the outside world, nothing about anything but himself, his feelings, his thoughts, his story. And that starts really early with his childhood, which is sort of uncommon. And that's another great thing about Rousseau that not many people acknowledge. Rousseau really changed the way we see and think of childhood and children. When he wrote L'Émile, or L'Éducation, he gave us so many tools that are nowadays obvious and common knowledge, but at that time were revolutionary. Some people would say that Rousseau was not really honest in his memoirs. I would really have to disagree with that because he gives us so many information that would not really be easy to share with people. He speaks about the lies he said, the things he was ashamed of. For example, the fact that he finds a sexual pleasure in being spanked, and he talks in depth and length about the love of his life, Madame de Varese. You have to realize that at the time he was living, talking about those things was completely revolutionary, completely brave and courageous and scary. And the fact of the matter is that Rousseau had a very, very, very difficult life. Unlike Voltaire, he was not born from a noble family, he was not rich, and he didn't like society, parties, luxury, or anything like that. He had a very simple life, very little money, he traveled a lot, and he even had to flee from France after publishing Émile, and at that point he even ran the risk to be sent to jail, and his books were burnt. Some people ask me why I don't like Voltaire very much. I don't really have anything against the work of Voltaire, but him as a human being I think was a despicable person. When Rousseau had to flee from France, was feeling like shit because at the end of his life Rousseau had some mental health issues. When Rousseau was in exile, Voltaire did not let him in peace. First published a very negative review of La Nouvelle Héloïse, or Julie, and he said that this book was silly, bourgeois, impudent and boring. Anyway, it's not really important because this book became a success immediately. And in response to the exile of Rousseau and in response to L'Émile, Voltaire published anonymously, obviously, a pamphlet called Le Sentiment des Citoyens, in which he suggested the execution of Rousseau and made fun of his health in a very cruel way. I like about Rousseau, I think it's precisely what bothers some people. It is this amazingly sharp consciousness of his being, of who he was and what his life was. He had this amazing capacity to be so moved and inspired and in awe in front of everything. And the reason to that is probably the fact that he was born almost dying and that his mom died when giving birth to him. He had this pre-consciousness of death and he cherished life more than anyone else. He loved nature, he loved animals and human beings and feelings and art and beauty. But he wanted, I think, to share that with the world, but the fact is that he was so sensitive and so defenseless that this drove him crazy. Even if you don't like his writing style, which I think would be a shame, but you are able to feel and comprehend how he could perceive beauty everywhere to a level that I think so few people can feel. He was very provocative, but I don't think he really meant to. He wanted to experience things, he wanted to feel them as much as he could. And it really annoys me when I see people that think of him as being arrogant, because he's not. Basically, I think people are taking his greatness of soul for arrogant. People think it has to be some sort of very embellished and exaggerated depiction of himself and his feelings because it's so wow that it cannot be, but no. And people also have to realize that yes, he was writing a lot about himself, but it was much needed. It was needed that we would take a look at what was happening inside. And I also wanted to seek for the individuality in each and every one of us, and he wanted us to feel and think by ourselves, which is a great goal. For me, Rousseau is very important because it was the first time I met an author that I could feel while reading the book. I felt immediately connected to him, and when I was reading the book, I wanted to hug him. And it's also very important for me because it kind of shaped my political views. And if you ask me who shaped you and who shaped the way you see things, I would say obviously me, but also greatly helped. So I hope you enjoy watching this video, guys. I hope you're going to open your heart with a fresh and beautiful white page and let him put some of his beautiful words into your heart. And if you feel like it, definitely give Les Confessions a go because it's a big classic, and the reason why you're probably reading and have read Autobiography now is mainly this book. right here. And I will see you later. Bye!